It gives me immense pleasure now to invite on stage our moderator for this session. Please give a warm welcome to Mr. Ajay, Partner, FS Technology Enablement, KPMG. Come on, ladies and gentlemen, let's have a huge round of applause for him, please. So very, very warm welcome to you. I would now like to invite on stage our elite set of speakers. Please put your hands together and welcome Mr. Rajiv Anand, Deputy Managing Director, Axis Bank Limited. So very, very warm welcome. I now invite on stage Mr. Rama Mohan Amara, DMD and CRO, State Bank of India. So very, very warm welcome. I now request Mr. Ratan Kumar Kesh, Interim MD, Bandhan Bank, to please come forward. Welcome, sir. And please help me in welcoming on stage the MD and CEO of Fino, Mr. Rishi Gupta. It's a pleasure to have all of you here. Over to you. I apologize. Please put your hands together and welcome Mr. Ramesh Lakshminarayanan, Chief Information Officer, CIO, HDFC Bank. Let's have a huge round of applause for our wonderful panel members here.
Hello. Good evening. I am Ajay from KPMG and I welcome you all to the panel discussion. The topic is QR code in payment lending as well as insurance space. So I also thanks the panelists to be part of these discussions. So we'll start our discussion first with the introduction round. So we'll go one by one, starting with the Ramesh.
So, I'm Ramesh. I take care of the IT functions for HDFC Bank. So, thank you.
Yeah, I'm Rishi Gupta. I'm MD CEO of Fino Payments Bank.
I'm Ratan, Kesh, Interim MD and CEO Bandhan Bank.
I'm Mohan Amara, Chief Risk Officer at State Bank of India.
I'm Rajiv Anand, the Deputy Managing Director, Axis Bank.
So before starting the panel discussion, so I will just give you the background, okay, why this topic and how this topic has come up to the panel. So as we know that QR code has a wide acceptance, or it has impacted all the aspects of payment. Not only the payment, it has gone beyond the payment also. In fact, we all use QR code for some or other purpose on daily basis. Okay, and it has impacted a payment in a big way. The reasons are quite a few reasons. So something that it's a frictionless payment. It doesn't need any kind of large capex or opex investment to manage the payment through this. And yes, it somehow people from all layers of the society are able to use this without any, I will say, a fear or anxiety. So that is the reason it has gained the wide acceptance. But again, as I said, that we'll pick the point of view of our panelists. And we'll start with the first thing, that what actually is the QR code and what are the drivers which has led to the wider acceptance or adoption of this concept, not only in the payment, beyond payment also. So I'll give it to Mr. Ramesh so that he can share his point of view on this.
I think this is a very unique discussion. I mean, something like a QR code getting discussed at such a high-power panel, right? But that's the reality. That's the beauty of India, right? I mean, nobody thought 7-8 years back that a QR code could be such a big, impact creator. But here we are today, like every bank, every financial institution, in fact, every walk of life we see QR code. I mean, right from getting into airports to restaurants to getting into banking, I think it's an amazing journey. And what's happening is that now if you see more and more organizations are kind of converging towards convenience, because the key factor here is the convenience factor. So if you see, it started with the payments in the banking sector and the financial sector. But what you're seeing is now a very clear convergence. So as an example, I just quote, like we today have something called an expressway in our bank. where everything gets converged into this particular expressway. And that expressway is nothing but a QR code that's kind of there in every single branch of ours, or merchant or whatever it is. So it's a single theme that we picked up. And the fact is that it can support, like, Ajay said, it's not just about payment. So you could do, practically origination, form filling, lending. You can do multiple things with the QR code because that's the beginning of journey. So I think what we are seeing is a very, very beautiful way of getting things together and making the life very simple for the customer. And that's the power of the QR code. And then what we are also seeing, people did not think that, something like a QR code can keep improving upon, and we can keep getting new hacks. And that's what we are seeing today. And I'm sure during the course of the discussion, we'll hear a lot of new hacks that are coming in, new different ways of using a QR code. And that's what's so exciting about it. So clearly, lots of things that have happened. But I think there's many more things that will be imagined through QR code.
So thank you GFF. See, when in 2016 the entire evolution of QR code was happening, there used to be a lot of debates, especially in the banking circles, whether QR code will actually take over the entire POS infrastructure and POS infrastructure will die. I think somewhere over the last 7-8 years we have seen that there have been two separate markets which have got created. One market for high value transactions, which largely are happening through the POS infrastructure, but small value transactions and making it extremely free. And I think the UPI made a lot of difference in terms of the growth of the QR, which has happened in the last 7-8 years. I think this is just the start, and more applications will actually follow into it. I think what has also happened is that the QR integration into everybody's life. If you have a mobile app, if you go to your photo, you will see a QR code for an individual. We cannot expect that something like 7-8 years back, that something like that I will be on a QR code and people can just scan my QR code and pay. So that kind of evolution has happened in terms of dynamic QR codes, in terms of evolution, and the cross-border is another big conversation which we are hearing on the entire QR code journey. In terms of the transformation which is there, in terms from payments, I think payments make the entire availability so homogeneous and so rapid and at a mass scale. I think from there we have started to see QR code being used in multiple purposes, whether it's with repayments, whether it's with premium payments, claim payments. At airlines, we are seeing air ticketing, the entire Yatra, Digi Yatra and everything else is also on that platform. So a lot of benefits and a lot of things which it's a very simple thing, a very low cost thing, and where so much of data can be stored on it. In fact, a lot of books are now being put on the QR code itself. So it's a transformation which is happening, and I would say we are at the start of it, and you will see a lot of innovation happening around it, and I'm quite positive that it will definitely move to a mass scale outside payments also as we move forward.
Thank you. Very good evening to all of you. I want to thank NPCI, PCI, GFF for having us here. I think it is quite surprising what Ramesh said, that we are actually discussing QR code sitting on a panel, because we cannot almost get away without a QR code almost every single day and multiple times in a given day. In fact, when 1994 Denso, I think Masahiro Hara, when he developed this QR code for manufacturing efficiency, he didn't realize that in a GFF with 80,000, 1 lakh footfall, we'll be discussing QR code and what are the evolution of that. In our context specifically, what we are seeing is that both for collection and payment, it's quite powerful. We have just about launched our QR code based solutions. And what we see going forward, what it can do for a segment where at the bottom of the pyramid for the microfinance, for example, most of them may not necessarily have the formal credit records, whether it is bureau records or whether their income statement, household income, etc. But if that entrepreneur, small lady doing a small business is, the lady with doing a small business is making the payments and receiving payments using a QR code, you're actually creating the cash flow to have an alternate avenue for credit underwriting. And that's a very, very exciting use case that I would say is very powerful. Second, many of these entrepreneurs at a micro and SME, I think Prime Minister spoke in the morning that the farmer has to do their own work, a small entrepreneur has to go on with their life of generating income. And if you got to come and ask them to make the payment walking into one of your branches or even for the meetings, that consumes a lot of their time and it actually can reduce their ability to generate income. So if you can give a QR code based payment capability with secure dynamic QR code in their so-called passbook or the banking app, I think it reduces the cost of collection for us and it reduces their hassle to go into the banking outlets and make the payments. I think these are some of the exciting use cases and we'll talk more about it.
Good evening, everyone, and thanks to NPCI and GFF for inviting us. I think I will only share one experience what I had particularly during the COVID time. I was heading a circle called Bhopal Circle with a jurisdiction over 2 states, Madhya Pradesh and Chhattisgarh, peak of the COVID time. And the one segment of population which was impacted most was the street vendors. I think some of you may recollect, Prime Minister announced a scheme called PM Swanidhi, which is a small ticket loan, 10,000 rupee loan to be given to the vendor. As long as they registered, they have a registered in a particular portal sponsored by that urban body. And as long as they have an Aadhaar, that should be suffice for them to walk into any branch and get the loan of 10,000 without asking any questions. But the biggest hesitation during that time was neither the branch teams were willing to engage with the vendors in such large numbers because of the fear of contracting COVID. And at the same time, vendors were also not sophisticated enough. So we solved it in 2 ways. First of all, we looked at our manual processes, whether it's a 10,000 rupee loan or a 100 rupee loan in the bank. I'm talking about a traditional bank, where a lot of manual process will be there, some document collection will be there, some agreement will also be there. So first the state government realized and they have done away with the stamp duty on such a small loan. Second thing with that, we were able to automate the entire journey. Whatever little checks we need to do in terms of bureau, we were able to automate. The third thing that helped them was we generated a QR code and they were able to put it on their, whatever is the one they were using in their shop or whatever it is. With the result, even the customers were also, instead of cash, they were able to pay it digitally. So I think at one go, QR code and automation solved the major problem that was there at the material time. Of course, Mr. Kesh talked about digital collections, again an offshoot of COVID, where when the feet on street were not able to contact or otherwise when the customers were also not willing to entertain, the digital collections came in a very big way, where we were able to send the communications and QR code pre-populated with the EMI, etc. And then the customer has to simply scan and make the payment sitting at home. So that way, these 2 use cases came very prominently out of several use cases.
While I do agree that we're all wondering why we are discussing QR, but I think it's important for us to look back in history. And I remember the time when we were just moving to tap and pay. This was about 10 years ago, NFC payments, etc. And really it took us almost 8 to 10 years, and today all of us are using tap and pay. At the same time, we used to look at China and admire how ubiquitous QR codes were in China and how they were, pretty much everybody was using it. And the journey that we have come through over the last 10 years to be able to, come to the situation that we are today where, and I'm sure all of you have seen this pictures of even the beggar having a QR code I think it was in Chennai or somewhere, is the situation that we have come to where the acceptance of the use of this funny looking thing is being used by the sophisticated to like I said, the beggar as well. I think is a huge leap that we have made. And I think the Prime Minister spoke about the fact that cash is king. Cash is in a sense no longer king, and cash is the enemy. And all this is really helping us in fixing the issues that we've had with cash. The other big one that has happened over the last few months or the last year has been credit on UPI. And why is that important? I mean, earlier the battle was really to be able to give each of those merchants a POS terminal, do KYC, etc. The whole process was expensive and cumbersome. Then QR codes came in, and that almost instantaneously you were able to literally bring in, typically, for those of you who don't know, maybe 5, 7, 8 years ago, it was a classic 80-20 principle. 80% of transactions were from 20% of merchants. And we used to have a long tail of merchants who used to do perhaps one transaction on a credit card or on a POS terminal. Through the use of QR codes, we've actually now come to a situation where we literally have millions of merchants, and millions of these merchants will now be available from an acquiring perspective if you want to use the RuPay card, for example, which is UPI on credit. Earlier, if you used a credit card, you could only use it on a POS terminal. Now you can use it on all these terminals just because of QR, and that fundamentally has changed the dynamics in the acquiring and issuing environment, so much so that like we now have even the kelawala on the street who accepts QR, or the auto guy who accepts QR. And I think that has been a seminal shift in terms of how the acceptance of QR has changed the way payments have played out over the last 10 years. Today, we all think it's just day to day, but I think if you look back over the last 10 years, I think it's been a phenomenal journey.
Thank you. So I will just add to what Rishi said. In fact, when QR code was launched, it was said that it will cannibalize the POS, right? But actually we see that both are coexisting and both are growing. The reason is simple, that QR code is able to bring the unbanked people also into the banking fold, and the ticket size is less. So it's basically complementing or expanding the addressable market of the digital payment. For example, I myself have witnessed that, because when I was about to make a payment and I was not carrying a card, the merchant simply generated a static code and turned it towards me. Sir, please scan your QR code and make the payment. And that was the time where first time I used the QR code, and it was seamless. The payment was very seamless. Then I saw that both are coexisting, and the target set of customers are also different because the ticket size is different. And it has been able to bring the lots of smaller merchant into the banking fold. So what has that done? That has helped us to generate a huge amount of data into the system. Now, how banks are using this data to underwrite the processes or loans, to create a newer kind of product, or to target this segment which was remain unbanked, but now they have generated a huge amount of data for us that can be analyzed, that can be studied, and that can be monetized further. So these are some of the points.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I think much of the data that we had was one on the retail side for obvious reasons. We had transaction data where because by looking at your credit card bill, we knew that you like Chinese food, or you played sport, or whatever it is. So therefore, we had a lot of data on the retail side, which we used from an underwriting perspective. But over the years, there is so much more data. First on sort of the large corporates plus the SMEs. As GST came through, as more transactions came through digitally, more data was available. But now, thanks to QR and P2M transactions, we are now able to get data even for very small merchants. And that gives you the opportunity to be able to now underwrite them, because you're actually able to see cash flows on a day-to-day basis. And because you're seeing cash flows on a day-to-day basis, your ability to underwrite these entities, which even 5 years ago did not exist. Just to give you a perspective, there are 7 crore MSMEs in this country. Out of that, almost 96-97% are M's, which are micros. And it is really in this space where banks struggle to lend. But given the fact that we are seeing so much more data, not just because of QR, but because of digitization that is playing out, and thanks to the availability of data through GST, these guys have become more bankable, which means that where hitherto they used to borrow from money lenders, etc., at 3%, 4% a month, are now able to get financing from the formal sector. And I think that once again is a big shift that's happened thanks to the progress that we made on the payment side.
Yeah. Just to supplement what Rajiv has said, I think India has a lot of mom and pop shops, right? I mean, lakhs of mom and pop shops are there. I think before advent of QR, perhaps most of the dealings are in cash. So obviously you don't have the data, you have the challenges in terms of understanding what is the turnover, what is the revenue. But the moment they started using the QR code, I think a rich amount of information is available, as Rajiv has said. And then of course, fintechs have started deploying the AML kind of algorithms. They could figure out like what can be the limit that can be given to them. And of course, they figured out ways of even taking the money either on a daily basis or otherwise a weekly basis, customized kind of repayment programs. I think banks have joined the bandwagon, then obviously as part of merchant acquisition. I think this is one of the elements definitely one will look at what kind of inflows are there and the data is very, very useful.
Yeah, I think I agree with all the other speakers, Rajiv and others have spoken. Clearly, three more aspects which I'll talk about. One is that linking with UPI actually has created a significant boom in this whole transaction space. And I think Prime Minister Modi spoke in the morning, which is correct, that almost 50% of all digital transaction which happens around the world actually happens in India, thanks to this whole QR code and UPI integration. Second is this integration with merchant. And it's not really different customer segment. If you see both from the consumer as also from the merchant side, I use QR code, I also use credit card. The merchant also uses a physical POS, a digital POS as also QR code. So it's just the ticket size and the convenience is what actually determines as to who is going to use and what situation I'm going to use what. And it's more choice given to the customer, and because it is seamless to get QR code, unlike a POS going through a current account and the whole KYC process, it makes it a lot more simpler for people to access it. So that's the second point. Third, I think two more important aspects is that some of the merchants now are able to see this whole billing statement and category-wise statements using this QR code, the transaction history, and actually can manage their own business well. It's almost like you don't need one more accountant. This is actually helping them to manage it well. And the next 2 points are super important. The lenders are now able to see where is the customer using this money for. For example, I have given a lending to somebody 20,000 rupees, and you see that that person is probably utilizing it in a gaming app. You know that there is an early warning signal. So it can go to that level of sophistication to say, where is it getting utilized? And the next one is this whole AML trigger. With so much of data getting created, if the borrower or if a customer using the QR code transaction for areas which are not appropriate from an AML standpoint, it can actually lead to your AML trigger. So these are all very, very important data that is getting generated, which can be utilized effectively.
I think we cannot underestimate the power of data which is going to come. In fact, if I look at before 2016, before the QR code actually came in, and even the depth of the payment ecosystem which was not there 10 years back, I think most of us were doing transactions in cash. There was no integration of the customer data into, because you withdraw the money from your bank and then the money becomes invisible and you don't know where you are spending. So the bank had no idea where the consumer was spending all that money. The merchant also was getting the same cash. He also could not show everything onto their books. So the bank had no clue what was the entire turnover and the business of the merchant. So with the QR code, in fact, with the millions of merchants now being on the QR code, both the data of the customer in terms of where is he spending, how is he spending, as well as the data of the merchant is now available. I think that's a big change which has happened. Everybody knows that data is the new king and data is going to help all of us do better businesses and become more efficient as we go forward. Having said that, I think credit is one area we have actually started to see a lot of benefit both from the consumer point of view as well as from the merchant point of view, where both of them are benefiting from the data which is now coming out from the QR. I think a lot of other benefits, especially when I look at in marketing also, when we do target marketing, in marketing also because of the data now we are getting, we can do more target marketing to those specific merchants, those specific consumers in terms of from the data which we are getting from the QR code usage which is there. Apart from that, when a bank starts to look at some new products and everything else, the data of the transactions, the data of the products which are selling or not selling also becomes a lot of input comes from there, which also helps us to make the product even better. I think there are enough and more uses of data which will come over a period of time. But more importantly, credit is an area where we have started to see benefit and more benefits will come from the data in the future.
I'll just pick up, on the point on, marketing and how, personalized marketing. I think one of the big changes that we are seeing with QR code is contextual QR codes. Clearly, there's lots happening in the industry. You can really hyper-personalize, target QR codes, program it, with everything. I mean, right from reward point, cross-sells, small pocket, promotions. So lots of stuff can be done. So I think what I'm seeing is that clearly morphing contextual QR would be a very, very interesting area that you would see coming up. And especially for the marketing folks, I think they're going to see very different set of. I do imagine you might even have a kind of a QR which mimics your kind of photo in that sense. It could go to that level of personalization. So that's one part of what's happening. The other part, which is very interesting, is interoperability. I think I'll just give you a simple example. Today, when the UPI and the CBDC QR codes, when the CBDC was started getting accepted on the UPI QR code, technically today, you can scan the QR, and you can use the UPI rails. But just a small hack can actually, and we just launched that product in the market. You can do an offline CBDC. On the same QR, you're running, on the same QR rails, you're running the UPI, which means you generate a UPI transaction, goes all the way up to the switch, goes to the settlement process, comes back, which is the normal process we follow. But assume that if you use the same QR code and you want to push it on offline, which means debit to the customer wallet and the credit to the merchant wallet on an offline basis, on the same QR code. So this is the level of interoperability. Cross-border, somebody mentioned, but I think it's going to be huge because as we create more corridors, how do you really kind of go and ensure that the experience is seamless? Because you're not going to be able to paste your own QR codes into other geographies. So you really have to work with interoperable thought processes. So whether it's an Indian going into Singapore and trying to use an UPI, on a rail, that QR code rail that's already created, would be a very fantastic way to look at it as interoperability of this starts coming through. And I do see some momentum, but I think this will be a big thing to my mind. So these are two, the interoperability and the contextual QR are also kind of, besides the data point that came out, are two of the exciting things that we are seeing in the market. It's wonderful.
Thank you, Ramesh. In fact, I will add to this. We see that UPI being exported to other part of the world. Okay, that means day will come when we'll have to encourage the multi-currency, multilingual capability onto the QR code. So there will be a need for interoperability of the single standard across the globe for a cross-border money transfer. So that is one area. Second thing which Ramesh also said, that contextual code. So we now know that it's matured from the static to dynamic, now the contextual code. And why the contextual code will be powered by the QR code is that QR code itself can carry a huge amount of data. It's not only a payment data, it can carry other data also, which can be used for the marketing, for a cross-sell or the upsell. And we know that our mobile devices also has a compute power. So merchant will have a stronger mobile devices with a stronger compute power, so they can generate a product, contextual product on the fly along with the transaction. So that is the reason QR code will see many more use cases outside payment also. There can be one more example. Can we integrate two QR codes? For example, can it be used to automate the process to a next level of maturity? Of course, there will be some security or the privacy challenges, but that can be again ring-fenced with something like the OTP validation or something like that. So I will give the use cases. For example, if I have my individual QR code, other person will have also an individual QR code. When I go to a bank or to insurance company to fill up the form, can I simply pass on my QR code so that the form which is already in a QR code will capture my data? And the form filling becomes the automated. So these are some of the use cases that is being innovated. And very soon you will see that some of the company will be coming in with a high level of process maturity with the help of QR code. The cost of automating that process will be also less. So these are some of the examples which we will see. Again, our topic is also related to insurance. So we didn't touch upon the insurance, but insurance also will see mainly into a general insurance where there is the different kind of products are there, different kinds of products are insured with a various ticket size. So for example, embedded insurance. the embedded insurance can come along with the QR code also. So premium payment for the insurance will be also easier through a QR code. Maybe not for the life, but for the general, it will see a wider acceptance. So these are some of the use cases which will touch upon the payment, lending, as well as the insurance. Now the next topic can be that with every advent of technology, there is a chances of fraud also increases. As we say that hackers are one step ahead of the technology. So what are the challenges we see in terms of ring fencing the transactions or to addressing any kind of fraud or security challenges in these transactions?
No, I think it's an interesting question. In fact, I look at it in two ways. So while a lot of phishing, wishing kind of attacks are happening using QR codes, and it's a known thing. So, right set of QR code being presented, QR codes being swapped. These are very, very common things, which is happening. So obviously a lot of work has to happen in this area in terms of designing this thing. But on the other side, and the same example, there is also an industry opening up called passwordless, where QR codes are kind of coming in as an enabler actually. So for example, a lot of places here, if you have a simple device ID, which is SIM bound, and device bound, and there's a QR code, you could use a net banking to be the safest login. You just don't need a password to log in. You could just kind of put your QR code on top of that and you can get in. Right. So I think security-wise, while on one side, this whole aspect of duplication of QR code, false QR code, swapping of QR codes, phishing attacks, these have to be kind of taken care, and a lot of work has to happen. But on the other side, I also see QR code solving for security solutions. So I think it's a kind of a dichotomy that we live in, and how do we want to use that actually?
See, I think the Prime Minister also spoke about it in the morning in terms of the cyber frauds which are happening and the fact that the people who are doing it are much ahead of everybody else. I think the QR code has the same story. As Ramesh mentioned, there are so many ways. And as a consumer, when I scan a QR code, I have no clue whether it's a genuine QR code or not. So that challenge is there. I think to some extent the industry is working on it. It's not like that the work is over and we have all the solutions to this kind of frauds. But with a lot of encryption which is there, the dynamic QR code, and now we are even talking about authentication layer over and above QR code, which will actually validate through a bio or an OTP kind of it takes away the entire frictionless payment ecosystem, but somewhere the frauds and the risk which is associated with the QR, and for that matter with every digital online business which you are doing currently, there is inherent risk which is there. I can only say that the industry is working on it, but it's always going to be challenging. I think that is one area where I feel, and that we need to even be ahead of some of the fraudsters which are there. Fortunately, what has happened is that in the last couple of years, the entire ecosystem within the banks, the law enforcement agencies, the FIU, the RBI, ED, and everybody else has come together in a very big way, and a lot of ecosystem things have started to come to play, which is actually making it much easier to control this kind of frauds. But I would say, as I see it, it's still a long way to go, but it's a problem, genuine problem.
But I think one could argue that QR codes are actually a little more secure. Yeah. You can encrypt data, sensitive data, because I think ultimately, fraud, etc., is relative. And in that relative scheme of things, even there, QR codes, better than some of the other forms.
I agree. Compared to the significant volume of transaction, what you are seeing, the fraud numbers are fairly small in percentage terms in QR code. Of course, dynamic code is one of them. Sound boxes, additional layer of encryption are coming.
Yeah, just only one point. Rishi talked about ecosystem coming together to address the digital frauds. I think one initiative of RBI is also creating a digital payment intelligence platform, DPIP. I think some working group was created. So it was meant for sharing the kind of information among the players, where the players like a bank will not only have the benefit of knowing about their own customer, the transaction, maybe the device ID, etc., what kind of risky nature, but through the DPIP, they will also have the benefit of looking at where the money is going and what is the kind of, maybe from a fraud angle, what kind of score can be attributed. Perhaps that can also be consumed for a final decision making. So hopefully, if it is in place, I think it should be solving some of the issues what we face on a day-to-day basis.
So finally, we can say that QR code will grow, will evolve. There will be number of innovation on top of it, not only for the payment, but outside the payment areas also in terms of processes. Like for example of maybe an insurance for the claim payout also, for pains also. So we'll see there will be a number of innovations and all the security or the challenges will get addressed. And it has given a confidence to the consumer also because as I said that it's a frictionless, it's a low cost payment. Okay, we don't need to invest heavily onto the infrastructure to enable this kind of payment. So it's had created a financial inclusiveness also among the merchants or the MSME segments. And now I think we have a time limitation. So before getting into the next question, so I will say that we can close this discussion, but before that we'll go to the audience. If there are any questions related to any areas, please raise your hand and we'll try to address that. Yes. Yeah, please go ahead. I think his mic need to be enabled. Yeah, please go ahead.
My name is Vijay Jain. I'm from Persistent System. My question is that QR-based scam is happening a lot in India.
Right.
Lots of people are, their valuable monies are lost in the last years, I would say. More than 5,000 or 10,000 crore rupees is fraud is happening in India. So what are the banks or authorities taking care of that?
So
I think, I just kind of, because I don't know about the numbers because these are not driven by QR. There is a larger, UPI ecosystem fraud that's coming through. And that's not driven purely by QR code, and I'll get my panel members to come in here because at the end of the day, what we are seeing is that the UPI frauds themselves have gone up, but so have the banks have also fighting back. So whether it is in terms of a lot of social engineering education that's happening, a lot of behavioral biometrics is coming, behavioral, engines are coming at the back end, adaptive authentication has taken shape due to DPSC guidelines. And there is almost near real-time fraud monitoring that's coming up as a framework in each of the banks today. I mean, most of the banks, in fact. So I think it is an evolving thing. So while UPI is popular, I don't think we can attribute the frauds to the level that you spoke only from a QR code perspective. And like the panel member said, you will have to keep ahead of the game in terms of the way the QR codes are circulated, the phishing, wishing attack, all of that stuff has to be come through. But yeah, any panel members can come in.
So I just want to...
Sorry, go ahead. No, so I think you are right. The banks are doing a whole bunch of things in terms of real-time fraud monitoring and lots of other guardrails. Clearly, most of the banks now are able to prevent almost 90 to 95% of the attempts that are happening. So what is falling through is just about 5%, and there also, it is unfair, but most places you will find there is sort of a compromise on the part of the customer, knowingly, unknowingly, most often unknowingly. That's the reality. But yes, banks are doing a whole lot of things, but it's a bit of a thin line. Sometimes as a bank, I can, using my risk engine alert, I can say it's an unusual pattern, therefore I'll stop the transaction. And the customer may say that, why did you stop it? I felt embarrassed, I couldn't use a particular so-and-so, I was entertaining my guests. That's clearly a very dangerous terrain at times, and customer service may get impacted. So you have to play it a little carefully on either side. So that's why I said that 90 to 90%, 5% we are able to protect. Only 5% fall through, but we are doing a whole lot of other things to sort of prevent that as well.
I agree with that.
Rajiv, so you had some numbers, and I also have some numbers. UPI transactions are 1.6 trillion US dollars, out of which, UPI transactions are 3.5 trillion dollars, out of which 1.6 trillion is on QR based. So in the larger scheme of things, that number is relative. I mean, as part of the community, I think every rupee lost of a customer is important. I am not for a moment, saying that the amounts are small. The point that Ratan made and Ramesh made is banks continue to work very hard to ensure that we are tightening standards as much as possible. But I think there is always a challenge between between a customer experience on one side and tightening too much. If I put too much friction in some transactions, I think some friction is good. On lending transactions, for example, some friction is good. From a risk control perspective, and I'm sure the CRO on the panel will agree. And so therefore, creating a little bit of friction is, while we all want very good seamless experiences, some friction is, in some cases, is perhaps essentials. But the point I'm making is, as a bank, we've got to balance out customer experience on one side and risk on the other side, because you don't want a situation where you're putting too many checks and balances such that the customer experience is terrible, and usage of UPI or QR or whatever falls off the cliff. So you got to get that balance right.
So I think we are running off that time. So yes, please, last one. After that, we can close this.
Hello, my name is Abhishek, and as you have rightly pointed out, QR code enabled you to underwrite merchants better. I wanted to understand from live transaction history of a merchant how it can be helped for collections, because at time merchant will have rent and other costs coming up. So how you can utilize live data of merchant to predict when there is EMI and you won't call them for collection at that point of time. How it's being implemented right now for collection. Yeah.
So we haven't reached at that level of sophistication to know what categories of payment customer is doing, and therefore that there is a money in the account, and therefore we should not be calling the borrower. But yes, as I said, at a macro level, you are able to generate more data and more cash flow to be able to underwrite better, number one. And number two, if you know that the particular borrower has a history of not making payment, then you actually can generate this QR code to know that what kind of intervention you are expected to do for which customer borrower in which particular month. So that data can be utilized. We still have to do a lot of work, analytics to be able to reach to that level of sophistication.
I will just add a small thing to that. So it's not only a pattern of the transaction, you need to see the tenure of the history also, right? Since how long this merchant has stayed in the digital transaction setup, and what is the velocity of the transactions, right? And there are many things which goes into that analytics. Then you can build upon that. Yes, this is good to underwrite. Of course, there are always an element of risk into that. And it's not only that transactions through a QR code need to be analyzed. There are many other things that goes into complementing the underwriting process. Once that is done, then we can say that yes, we have the confidence level of collecting it back from the customer. Right. Yeah.
I think only one thing I can add, like a merchant acquiring banks, anyway, they have a control on the escrow. So looking at the merchant, looking at the tenor and size of the loan, they decide on the repayment program, whether it's a daily recovery or whether it's a weekly recovery, etc. They have a fair view around the revenue that's coming in as well. So I think they need not look for particular data element. The revenue flow itself will be a good indication. And of course, I said like a customized repayment program through which they try to control. Yeah. Not that they can eliminate the credit cost completely, but they will try to manage the collections problem.
Yeah, so with this we can close the panel discussion. I thank the panel members for participating in this panel discussion. I thank the audience also for being patient with us. And I thank the organizer also for inviting us to this. I don't know whether this is an interesting topic or not, but yes, right, because we discussed internally that. But I think we are running short of time. That itself says that yes, there are many queries that need to be answered. Maybe panel members will be available to us after this discussion, so we can have a discussion offline also. Thank you.